I have a business trip this weekend. I need you to take care of the housework and my mother.
What? It's been happening a lot, hasn't it? It's hard when you have to go on a business trip on a weekend. I understand it can't be helped on weekdays. You understand that it's tough, right?
But that's part of the job, isn't it?
That's true, but...
Then why don't you do my job instead? I'll do the housework. Can you earn as much money as I do?
That's impossible. You know that.
Right? So please stop nagging me about it.
Thanks. The conversation between my husband and I took place a little before the current issue arose. Nowadays, it seems odd to me that my husband would have a business trip even on his days off, considering his job. This is a story that happened due to his selfish behavior. My mother-in-law moved in with us. It has been a few years. She has developed dementia. The symptoms are still mild as of now, but she requires caregiving nonetheless. Initially, I thought her forgetfulness was simply increasing a bit, but gradually her cognitive and decision-making abilities started to decline. She started to get angry over trivial matters, which led us to seek medical attention, resulting in her diagnosis of dementia. In the midst of this, her husband, who had been battling a chronic illness for a while, had passed away. This event caused my mother-in-law to lose even more of her desires to live, and she began to seclude herself in her room. Seeing her condition worsening, our family discussed who should take care of her, and ultimately it was decided that the eldest son, my husband, should be the one to take care of her. When I married him, being the eldest son, I had braced myself for the possibility that a day like this would come. My mother-in-law was a very cheerful and lively person before her dementia. She married and gave birth at a young age, so compared to my parents, she is still quite young. The fact that she developed dementia was a great pity. According to my husband, his mother was strict in raising him, and he still fears being scolded by her. However, contrary to her relationship with my husband, my relationship with my mother-in-law was very good. To me, she was always kind and always on my side, and she was a reliable mother-in-law. I truly loved and respected her. Whenever my husband and I had an argument, I would consult with my mother-in-law, and she would scold my husband on my behalf. Seeing the troubled expression on my husband's face when he was scolded by my mother-in-law was quite comical. It was like a little child being yelled at by his mother. I believe our relationship was far more harmonious than most mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships. However, as I mentioned earlier, my mother-in-law became lethargic after her husband passed away, and she lost her strictness towards my husband. We, as a couple, gradually began to talk less and less. My husband took advantage of this and began to change his attitude little by little. Possibly resenting the fact that my mother-in-law had always sided with me, my husband's attitude became more arrogant. Upon reflection, I suspect that my husband may have intentionally taken on the care of my mother-in-law during the family discussions. Initially, my sister-in-law and her husband, who lived near our in-laws' home, were supposed to care for my mother-in-law, but my husband refused this arrangement. My husband flat out insisted,
"As the eldest son, it's only natural that I should take care of my mother."
He often got scolded by my mother-in-law, and their relationship didn't seem that great, so I was puzzled by his statement. Perhaps, as my husband suggested, he felt obligated to care for her as the eldest son. However, I didn't quite feel that way. I guess it was just my intuition. Once we started living with my mother-in-law, following the discussion, my suspicion was confirmed. My husband started to do whatever he pleased, taking advantage of my mother-in-law's situation. Before, He used to be intimidated by her strict, stern nature, but he started asserting his whims unabashedly. Despite her cognitive decline due to dementia, my husband showed no consideration and began to complain without restraint. I couldn't stand watching him behave like this, so I stepped in to stop him. And then an event occurred that could be described as a warning sign of my husband's misconduct. When my husband returned from a business trip after 3 days, I took out the laundry from his bag as usual. That's when I found an unfamiliar pair of underwears. I usually buy my husband's underwear, but this pair was something I didn't remember purchasing. Of course, since it was men's underwear, I figured it belonged to my husband, but I asked him about it because it bothered me. "I put a different pair of underwear in your bag. Where did that go?"
Underwear?
"I've never seen this pair before. Did you buy it yourself?"
Ah, that. I bought it on the spot while I was there.
"You bought it? Then where's the underwear I put in?"
I threw it away because it got torn. It was pretty old, you know.
Eh? Torn? No way. It was the pair I just bought recently, right?
Was it? You said you bought a cheaper pair than usual, so maybe it tore easily.
I see. Seeing my husband's awkward behavior, I became suspicious, but I didn't keep on questioning about it to him at that time. The thought that my husband might be doing something wrong briefly crossed my mind, but I decided not to worry about it unless something else suspicious occurred. But a new incident happened a few days later. I welcomed my husband at the entrance when he returned from another business trip. "You must be tired. Welcome home."
Ah,
he replied, sounding less than enthusiastic. Are you feeling unwell?" As I asked this, he said,
I have something to discuss with you. It's important.
He looked as though he'd made up his mind about something. My mother-in-law was already asleep, so I sat in the living room to hear what my husband had to say. What came out of his mouth left me astounded.
I want us to get divorced.
I was at a loss of words, suddenly hit with the term divorce.
I'm sorry for putting it out to you so suddenly, but please, let's separate.
Why?
To be honest, I've been having an affair. I found someone I love. I'm sorry.
So that's why there was an unfamiliar pair of underwear that time. You've been deceiving me this whole time. You're the worst.
I understand why you say that. Also, the woman I've been seeing is pregnant.
What? Pregnant? I exclaimed in surprise.
It's unexpected for me too. I was just informed of her pregnancy yesterday. She seems to be about 6 months into her pregnancy. I still can't quite grasp it, but I've decided to step up and be a father to this child. So please, let's get divorced. I'm begging you.
He pleaded earnestly. Okay, let's get a divorce. After hearing all this, there's no way I could continue to live with you as a married couple.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
And you're going to tell my mother-in-law about this too, right? At that, my husband got silent. Why are you silent? My husband, looking guilty, said,
About Mom. I want you to take care of her.
What? Do you even understand what you're saying? Get a grip.
I know, I'm being selfish. But don't you think it would be impossible for my lover to take care of both a child and an elderly person? You should be able to understand that if you think about it.
With that mindset, how can you still ask for a divorce?
I guess it's impossible, huh?
Of course it is. If you want a divorce, you should be prepared to accept everything that comes with it.
I understand. I'll figure something out.
Saying this, my husband locked himself in his room. That day, I too didn't want to think about anything, so I decided to take a bath and go to bed early. When I woke up the next morning, something felt strange, and as I looked around the room, it's clean. Wait, some things are gone? Thinking it can't be, I went to my husband's room. As expected, the room was emptied out with his belongings, and he was gone. I stood there, stunned, feeling deceived, when I noticed the divorce papers on the bed. His signature was already there, and beside it a note simply saying, "I'm sorry." This meant that he had forcefully left me with the responsibility of taking care of my mother-in-law who needed assistance due to her dementia. As I pondered what to do next, my heart filled with hatred toward my husband. I swore I'd never forgive him. I would get back at him. And so I decided then and there to act. I immediately went to a detective agency specializing in infidelity and requested them to gather evidence of my husband's affair. I would stop submitting the divorce papers for now, keeping our marital status intact. If we're still legally married, any action he takes now would be considered infidelity, and I knew that he wouldn't have considered about this. The investigation quickly revealed where my husband was living, which, as expected, was at his mistress's place. Him casually living there constituted evidence of his affair, and in half the time initially anticipated for the investigation, everything was prepared very quickly. I first presented the evidence and explained the facts to my mother-in-law. Even though she has dementia, I took my time explaining so she would understand, and gradually her previously lifeless expression changed. She became conversational, reminding me of the mother-in-law I used to rely on. When my mother-in-law found out that the mistress was an employee at my husband's company, she suggested sending the evidence there first. "Good, that's one retaliation done," she said, laughing. Several days later, when my husband contacted me, "Yes, what is it?" I replied in a nonchalant tone.
"Are you out of your mind? How could you send evidence of my affair to the company?"
My husband shouted over the phone.
"Why did you do that?"
When he asked this, I simply replied, "It wasn't me who sent it. Don't misunderstand."
"Who else could it be? It's only you."
"I don't think you've noticed, but it was your abandoned mother who did that. And by the way, this is not the end," I said and hung up the phone. He kept calling for a while, but I ignored it. My mother-in-law, who had witnessed this, said, "Now let's move on to the next punishment," and began to make a phone call from her room. After a while, the doorbell rang, and when I checked the front door, there was a woman standing there. I immediately recognized her as my husband's mistress from the photos of evidence. It turned out that my mother-in-law had called the mistress. I left the matter to my mother-in-law and stayed in my room. I couldn't hear the conversation between my mother-in-law and the mistress from my room, so I decided to ask my mother-in-law for details after they finished talking. It seems that the mistress didn't know about my mother-in-law's dementia. "I heard you're going to marry my son. I'm going to tell you something. In the near future, I probably won't be able to go to the bathroom by myself. You're going to have to take care of me. Even then, will you still marry my son?" My mother-in-law reported that the mistress was shaken by her words. As she explained the situation, my mother-in-law was excitedly saying, "I can't wait to see what happens next." I wondered if my mother-in-law's dementia was getting better. At the time, I didn't even consider that the actions my mother-in-law took would lead to an unexpected conclusion. The next day, the doorbell rang again. When I checked who it was, my husband was standing at the front door. "What is it?"
"I came to talk. Let me in."
I let my husband into the house and was about to listen to what he had to say, when he told me something I did not expect.
"I found out that the baby in her belly was not mine, so we broke up."
My husband claimed that the woman he was having an affair with had multiple lovers. Even though she knew that the child in her belly was from another man, she had chosen to claim it as my husband's child because out of her lovers, my husband had the highest socioeconomic status and salary. But after meeting my mother-in-law, she admitted the truth to my husband, saying that she couldn't possibly take care of my mother-in-law.
I'm really sorry. I've reflected on my actions, so won't you reconsider getting back together with me?
I'm sorry, but my decision remains the same. Therefore, please leave this house immediately. Also, regarding the divorce papers, there were some fields you didn't fill in, so they haven't been submitted yet. So, you'll still be considered as having an affair during our marriage. I'll be expecting the alimony from you. Saying this, I handed him the divorce papers with a smile.
What? Cut me some slack.
This is your own fault, you know. You must take responsibility for your actions. I said that and kicked him out of the house. After a while, my mother-in-law returned home from the hospital. When I reported the sequence of events to my sister-in-law who had accompanied her, she was indignant, exclaiming, "This is unbelievable! It's all his own fault." "Sarah, I'm really grateful to you. I'm so sorry for troubling you with my problems and my good-for-nothing son. Now that my daughter will be taking care of me, you can enjoy your new life from now on." My mother-in-law said this with tears welling up in her eyes. The next day, she moved into my sister-in-law's house. I was later told by my sister-in-law that my mother-in-law's dementia was not cured, but only it was being slowed down by the medication she's been taking. As for me, my divorce from my husband was finalized, and I was able to secure a good amount of alimony. By the way, my husband's mistress had resigned from her job. It seems that it had become difficult for her to continue working at her company due to the evidence about the affair my mother-in-law had sent. Sensing the situation, my husband submitted a request for a transfer, which resulted in a demotion and a significant pay cut. Through caring for my mother-in-law, I came to want to work in a field where I could help the elderly, and I'm currently striving to obtain a caregiver certification. I have my mother-in-law to thank for finding this new purpose in my life. While I'm deeply grateful to my mother-in-law, I sincerely hope that the progression of her dementia can be slowed down even a little and that she can live a long life.